Hello, we're here at the Bridging the Tongues Literary Festival. This is now our second tandem. This is at Brunnenpassage, a space of creativity, social engagement, multilinguality, multiculturality, exchange in Vienna. Thank you for being with us. And a few words about my dear co-moderator or moderator, Laura. Maybe you present yourself first.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Laura Pana. I'm a communication professional engaged in communication for positive change, a social innovator with Migration Lab, an organization that I created in 2014 and that is active in the field of migration. I'm a podcaster as well, and last but not least, a member of and writer with the collective Sprachwechsel. Hello, dear Loulou and Mandakini.
My name is Maiada. As I said, I'm a radio journalist, I'm a radio producer and working for Radio Orange many years of my life, which is also part of or partner of the festival. And we are broadcasting now in 25 languages, for example, so we are all at the right time and the right place. And again, hello and a very warm welcome to both of you, Mandakini Pachauri and Loulou Omer. Hi. Yes.
You prepared for us a thrilling performance. We are very much looking forward to it. We will proceed with the introductions of both of you, and then we will invite you to perform, and we will come back with questions and a discussion later on.
Mandakini is a poet and a non-fiction writer, yoga teacher, activist, and born in India and living at the edges of the Viennese forest. You explore themes such as loss and love in your works, and you have published in various prestigious publications in Austria, in USA, and UK.
Loulou, you are a multidisciplinary artist. Your work consists of poetic writing, dance, and composition for piano and voice. You were born in Tel Aviv and moved to Vienna after having lived in Paris, Brussels, and Berlin. You create polyartistic performances and collaborate with various artists from different artistic fields. And allow me to congratulate you for your recently literary word by Exil Lyric Prize. It was for your cycle Deutsche Texte. If I...
That's right.
It's right? Okay, great. And now we invite you to take on the stage.
Thank you.
Yes.
So thank you very much for this warm welcome, and thank you for this beautiful cooperation. I'm going to start with a poem of mine. It's called Mother India. When the old woman died, tradition demanded the men shoulder her home. In the country's coldest December, the women cut the sanitized packaging open. On the floor, evil-smelling effluents coagulated around her wizened fetus. They mopped and swabbed dry ravines of her ravaged skin. Shuddering, they strained to straighten her twisted limbs and gave up trying, to drape a sari around her, and settled for what worked. Salwar kameez she wore every day, propped up on pillows in the back bedroom. She leaned a little to the right. Sharply observing and cursing out the servants' partly hidden movements while they cooked food, purified water, stored supplies, and cleaned the kitchen. She took issue with every tray carried out to her by a new, frequently changing dark-skinned girl, her name forgotten as soon as it was uttered. "Nee," she yelled, "you black bitch, you barren widow, you whore. Bring me my medicine, my hot food, my clothes, my shoes. Hold me, massage me, take me to the toilet and wash my withered orifice of offal. Wipe and oil my rot. Mount me on the bed again with a thin, yellowing pamphlet certifying the mantra mumbled in the breaks. Serialized domestic drama in concentric close-up of shock and awe. Orc soundtrack of intergenerational checkmate. Now she lies decked out on the marble floor, her happily widowed daughter, red dots her forehead. A marathon chanter, she's close to retirement and taken to wearing jeans. She sobs over the dead tyrant and insists the towels used to clean the corpse be laundered, bleached white by downcast women toiling in the bedroom. The white-clad men sit silently, counting out notes, and drink hot milk in the living room. The old woman's dour expression, malevolence, has masked the family gathered here. Her eldest grandson has chosen, touched up and enlarged, printed and framed, miraculously overnight, a larger than life-size image from the 80s when she still was fecund, modest smile and veiled eyes, her head tipped slightly to the right.
לדוברי עברית בלבד. שרה שרה שיר שמח, שרה שרה שיר שמח. לא, לא פשוט, רק לדוברי עברית. אלא לאלה שדוברים רק עברית. שרה שרה. ליתר ביטחון, הרי 2000 שנות ותפוצות ולשונות. ליתר ביטחון, הרי 2000 שנות ותפוצות ולשונות. זה כדי למנוע השוואות, זה כדי שנישאר בעניין, זה כדי שנישאר בינינו, כדי שנישאר. שר שיר שמח, נוגה שר שיר נוגה.
Ecdysis. Glass-eyed and emaciated, he draws stone to his sunken mouth to pronounce magic. Needs no sustenance above dirty spoons and needles. Blue-black tracks mottle his driftwood arms. Waxen he lies in indifferent grace. He says, he feels, a floating, that something stops and bobs in some molten metal stream. It is not here, not there. It does not matter. Not one image stays on a TV left on. He shudders and shakes awake. Jolts of diarrhea and vomit come after uneasy hours of unclean sweat. He preempts pain, ever present behind all things. He takes what he wants. A gun he fills casually to kill. All in self-defense, he believes it's gone. His blood slows, a snake in winter coils, shrinks, rarefied, stalls. Absorbed, he draws a white drop to numb each pore. Nothing touches him now. He must be clean enough to come home, be one of the men who control and belong around the hearth. His skin cast off, the spell cast out.
התחלה שנייה. התחלה ראשונה התחלתי בכניסה האחורית של המחברת. שם אמרתי 2 צעדים קדימה ואחד אחורנית. ועכשיו פתחתי כיס. את כיס המרה, אני חושבת. פנדורה כבר משתוללת מזה זמן מה. אז אין זוהי מן הסתם זיכרונה לברכה, יימח שמה. יימח שמך, מעליל שקרים, מוציא דיבה. פנדורה האומללה, עוול של קריסטל, ננעץ כחרב בליבה של התיבה. ודורה, פניה דואבות, כל כולה מוקצת. שקץ, פסקו השופטים, גורלה חרצו בכיס המרה לתליין. אז לקחתי אותו מכיס המחברת, העברתי צד בלחש דוהרת, פרסתי פן, דורה פה, דורה שם, מדלגת דואה, טועה, נכשלת, זיכרוני לברכה, או זיכרוני, כושפת עד, אין קץ תקווה.
An abrogation. This poem is my shadow in a box, gold-rimmed black lacquer on white damask table, set to dine 12. A sun-flooded room, a crystal chandelier reflects, windows open on rolling lawns blend, in distant hills, trees unfold their leaves, stirring, cast intersecting nets of shadow. My poem hides behind cumulus. The sun comes, draws me indoors again, a room with shades drawn, sheets invite the stain of sleep on its meshed fiber, bleached to rest, give up color and resistance. Mute asking for nothing. A solo crow cries its proclamation thrice and leaves the naked green. My shadow grows weak as it grows darker. It fades and whispers, send, or was it end?
Gedicht für Schlaginstrumente. ממשמש ובא ובא ובא, ממשמש. Steht bevor und naht und naht und naht, steht bevor. משתהה, שוהה, תוהה, ממשמש, ממש, ממש, אמש, בושש, verweilt. Erstarrt, erstaunt, steht bevor, in der Tat, gestern wurde vertagt. ילדתי ילד, גדל גדול בגן. ערב לי הילד גדול בגן. שלי הילד, ich gebar, ein Kind im Garten wuchs es groß. Des Tages Neige vergnügte mich das Kind im Garten groß. Meins, das Kind. Und ich war nie Kind ילדה. Und meine Mutter wie אימי, Kind ילדה, gebar אותי, mich und sie, והיא ילדה kind, gestern אמש. בושש בושש ותקת ותקת לבוא, איחר מעודו zu spät גדול בגן, והנה, und da wuchs groß im Garten noch ein Kind, עוד ילד. בושש בושש ותקת ותקת מבשמש, steht bevor und naht und naht und naht, in den Gärten Edens, bluten begann הדמים של ערב, הרוב הרב, des Tages Neige, Vergnügen laute, לי, auf mich. Gedicht für Schlaginstrumente.
Winter or bud in Delhi. Coughing the street from my chest, the air filter maps my gasping. Thoughts collide in dry surrender. The clock ticks aloud. I will leave this bedroom. I am outside my mother's body. A country of dust and concrete hardens. Since my beginning, I stand for the fact of green. An animal driven to water, my field, my lungs, my word, take nothing, I put my name on. Sleep, mother, I am here, your unheard testimony. Dream an unbroken morning. Father stirs and turns, he watches over the relic that gave him life, and now slowly rewinds it. The electric pump switches on the vanishing for 60 into 24 beats. Loosened children plead on filthy streets. By toys, Didi, burst balloon, I walk past to a waiting taxi. I am the only one wearing a mask. I take off my shame, leave nothing changed. Here I remain the same. Pale, wavering between worlds, called forward and left behind, at once They hang their long necks. 3 sisters commit suicide. To protest their unmarriageability, they lock themselves in and use their dupattas. A woman's cloth is her virtue, woven, embroidered, and worn.
De toute façon, j'avais presque tout dit. À part ce que je n'ai pas dit, car le hasard hagard de mon passé s'est entassé à la gare. De toutes les directions, j'avais presque tout vu. À part ce que je n'ai pas pu, dû au bazar, du fil à aiguille, du passé dit en hébreu, avare. Et en plus, par-dessus les marchés, au-delà de toute attente, comme si décidément de rien n'était, tout pour ainsi dire, c'était tu. Sauf moi, en émoi, traversant en parlant à haute voix les 30 langues, les 1000 villes, enjambant les chaussées, les fossés. Par-dessus les marchés, au-delà de toute attente, comme si décidément de rien n'était, tout pour ainsi dire, c'était tu. Sauf moi, en émoi, traversant en parlant à haute voix les 30 langues, les 1000 vies, enjambant les chaussées, les fossés, les faits et les pas faits.
Snow dust. What is this fire stealing below the snow to make a point of every object? Sleeping stairs' downward progression, a squirrel runs across the hardened melt to stop and scan as if on stage and go on its way. It's been so long since I smiled at myself. No sooner than I'm alone, I begin to narrate the universe as I go about everything I grab by the hinge, to use as little force as possible, turning to release its accumulated dust. Set it all up, turn the machine on behind closed doors. The old poets cock their heads, raise their sights towards the song that begins inside my gut. White flurries from the roof, the house next door, where no one comes to relieve the pressure under accumulated snow. So much of this is timing. I would have not stayed back to see snowflakes driven in the wind, while tiny flecks stand still in the storm, if the windows hadn't dirtied long ago.
Spieglein, Spieglein, jetzt bitte ist es ein Problem geworden. Ganz schlimm. Schlimm, schlimm. Ich sitze da und stumme mich. Dumm, dumm. Geh, dicht. Wegen euch ganz schlimm. Wegen euch, Herr Majestät von Borderline, darf ich bitte über die Grenze leihen? Auch natürlich wegen mir, ich Herrin Gier, beuge mich vor dir, chère Madame Genehmigung. Would you be so kind and bring mich umherum? Oh, das meinte ich doch nicht verflixt, I'm doomed. Nur ein kleines Missverständnis, gar nicht schlimm. Wir haben es doch schon gesagt, du dummes Ding. Steh auf, versuch's nochmal. Voilà, das kommt. Vas-y, nou yalla, mach doch. Noch. Wie schaue ich aus? Gefalle ich dir? Wer ist verantwortlich hier?
To all my mothers, I call upon you to finally give me up. Stuck in the channel, nurtured by your dreams and visions of me, I have become known to myself, though I know nothing of the world and others that went before. Cajoled to respond, named their fates sealed, I have felt the dark doom in my blindness and longed to see for myself the field open.
Ich übersetze. Man könnte sicherlich sagen, dass ich mit einer gewissen, nicht unbedeutenden Dringlichkeit herumrenne, wie eine Maus das Loch des Notizbuches suchend. Ja, es muss sich in irgendeinem Notizbuch befinden, das Loch, durch das man ohne Störung ganz tief eintauchen kann und von der anderen Seite herauskommt. Wie Alice? Auf Hebräisch ist sie Elisa. Das bedeutet fröhlich. Den letzten Satz habe ich nur hier in der Übersetzung geschrieben. Und es gibt dort viele Dinge auf der anderen Seite. Viel ist Schrott, Schatten und amorphe Gestalten, die sich vielleicht später aufklären werden. Und unzählige Überraschungen. Eigentlich ist es dort alles voller Überraschungen, wirklich ununterbrochen, beispiellos. Nicht, dass sie immer gut sind, die Überraschungen. Es gibt schon von allem. Aber lieber eine nicht so gute Überraschung, als die ganze Zeit nur suchend herumrennen und suchen wie die Maus das Loch. Ansonsten sind sie am Kommen und Gehen, die Überraschungen. und bleibe nicht allzu lang. Es ist etwa wie bei einem Filmfestival, wo man ununterbrochen Filme anschaut, bewegte Bilder, die kommen und gehen, alle möglichen Geschichten, bis man durch das Loch des Notizbuches zurückkehrt. Notizbuch. Nein, hier muss ich etwas ganz anderes sagen. Eine Übersetzung geht gar nicht. Ich erkläre also. Das Wort Notizbuch heißt auf Hebräisch Machberet, aus der Wurzel Chet Bet Reish, womit das Verb lechaber, verbinden, aufgebaut ist. Beim ersten Schreiben auf Hebräisch habe ich begonnen, nach dem Sinn des Notizbuches heutzutage zu fragen. Und dann bin ich in eine ganz andere Richtung abgerutscht, mit dem Nachdenken über die Bedeutung von Verbundenheit. Denn die Sprache, Worte haben eine eigene Sprache, die manchmal nicht mehr zu tun hat mit der Person, die sie sagt, also ich. Alles das habe ich natürlich nicht in dem hebräischen Text geschrieben. Nicht so. Ist das ein Problem für die Deutschsprechenden? Ist das ein Problem? Eher eine Überraschung? Offensichtlich bin ich schon ganz nah an Alices andere Seite. Wie schön, dass es immer jemanden gibt, der dort auf mich wartet, mit allen Dingen. Alles ist so voll und wird nie weniger. Und in Esperanto, espérer et déconseiller, faire et croire, disait le bon Dieu, sans mots.
Power as a function of resistance. In the breathing forest, I walk the trodden path, observant of life emergent on all sides. A pale outline follows far behind. A white-haired woman draws nearer and passes. I stop and wait to let her go. Rain is my sunshine. It pinpoints leaves in the canopy of superimposition. Tiny explosions drizzle on my rain-coated body. Fragrance of wild herbs I have crushed almost every day in passing. My nostrils fill with memory. My mouth opens. A ring-necked dove coos and stops. The rain fills the gaps in gentle swells, too beautiful to stop listening and separate from the scene. Another younger woman strides uphill behind me, a soft hello, and she's gone, her eyes wide, camera in hand. I linger by the candelabra, elderflower, wet and swaying bitterness I know well before the curative dark swell.
Über die Sprachen. Er hat mich gefragt, und warum diese Sprache? Warum die da? Why these ones? Weil ich war einfach da, zufällig. Eine zufällige Geschichte, un hasard. Ich war da und dann da, de passage. Und sie waren da, wo ich war, par hasard. In mir, ich in ihnen. Und so bin ich, wer ich bin, zufällig geworden. You see? Es hätte auch alles anders sein können. wenn ich zufällig jemand anderes gewesen wäre. Mais ça ne l'est pas. C'est l'eau.
Om. I do not need to look to know the wild flowers. Closed overnight, they lie gathered on a brass plate, huddled like fallen children. They keep time with wild cherry trees, white day fireworks in ciliated larches. Beaches stretch lurid green. A single bird lifts high above the horizon. I have left the womb of night in haste. I overturned the red cup, poured and spread, a sky shattered in the east. Lately, I have begun to see a pair of turtle doves fly from high firs in the west. They climb and hold the air. With each wing beat, they leave my field of vision. This is the world worth fighting for.
Thank you for this tour de force of emotion and depth and multilingualism. Thank you.
It was just spontaneous, and that was the most beautiful part of it, I think. So thank you for letting us do this.
You decided to do it just 2 days ago.
Yes.
We already fixed
Yes.
our program, but we were very happy.
We never rehearsed it or any such thing.
This was the first rehearsal.
Yes, this was the first rehearsal. Yes.
We were talking on the phone.
Yes.
Then we will start the discussion by asking a few questions to each of you, and then one or two questions for both of you. Let's start with you, Mandakini, and I would like to quote something you said, something very beautiful. Poetry is another way to unite the diverse realities of life in today's often confusing world. Countries and cultures of origin are just an entry point into the journey we are all on. Can you please tell us what did you mean, or?
Well, I'd like to just use one word, and I think it's like relative. Everything is relative. And I think that, subjectiveness, that relativeness is best expressed in poetry, where language breaks down, meaning breaks down, also in multilingualism. We never can really say what we mean. We can never, maybe someone like Loulou can, because she uses her whole body and music, and there's like many dimensions. But I think words are inadequate. And we ourselves are inadequate in the, vis-a-vis reality. So, yeah, those are the words I'd like to use: subjectiveness, relativeness, and relatedness, yes.
How is the working process? What do you need? Do you need nature? Do you need silence? Or are you going through the very busy streets? Because we heard before you live a part of the city.
Yes. I need both. I find that if I'm walking in nature, and especially the Wienerwald has become my place. I've lived there for several years now. And it's very strange because, nature as we know it is also a cultural thing. Like, what do you call this tree if you don't even know its name, right? Or you observe certain things in a dissociated fashion when you have not had those seasons in your own country. So my observation, of course, it's gotten more used to it and more sort of Gewöhnungseffekt ist eingetreten. But before that, it was like always like a film or like something überreal, you know. So, and that is something which nature affords me in Europe. But once I come into the city, I think the cadence is important, movement is important, being on the U-Bahn, walking, and I think there's the tempo of words and language, which is closely related to music, of course, yes.
My next question actually goes hand in hand with with your answer. They are related. Listening to your poems, I could not help to notice that you are such a fine observer of the world around you, and the fact that you pay attention, and you end the poem with "This is the world worth fighting for, a world in which we are present." It also reminds me of a quote by Salman Rushdie. He said in an interview that poetry pays a lot of attention to language, and reading of poetry reminds you to pay attention. So my question to you is poetry for you a way to pay attention to what is going on in the world? And how do you manage to take a step back and stay present in a world that breathes immediacy, urgency, and speed?
Well, that's a very good question, an essential question. And if I may, I'd like to go back to the reading before. We had Suleiman talking about silence. I'd just like to share that when I came to Austria in the beginning, I was in the countryside. I didn't speak a word of German. So it was interesting. I was silenced, and I was silenced for a very long time. I didn't write poetry anymore. In fact, let's say I kind of broke out of my mold by burning all my old poetry books when I was about 30, where like when I'd written everything, right? So like, this is all crap, it's useless. And I burnt it in a wood oven in a small town in Austria. And it was very funny because I burned it, and then all this like smoke came out, and it was like threatening to, sort of suffocate me. I had to open all the doors and windows. And, like the smoke, some of my friends who asked me many years later, they said, where's your writing? And I said, oh, I burnt it. So then they were like, are you out of your mind? Are you insane? And, that's crazy. So I feel like that silence, that burning, that sacrifice, a fire sacrifice, creates a kind of a vacuum. And this is a vacuum that I have carried, and now I care for that vacuum. I actually invoke it by being mentally silent. I'm a yoga teacher, I meditate, and I think if you kind of keep your slate clean, right? So if your mind is very, very quiet, you automatically observe on a deeper level, So there's a difference in like navigating the world, and you see your, the shortest route to going there, or I have to do this, I'm like being full of purpose. And the difference is that you notice things and they make sense, right? So there's something like deeper behind that. And that is for me poetry. It's not just nonfiction, it's not just a factual thing, but it's also some sort of, you can only use metaphors to explain that. There's a web of meaning, or there's a music behind things, or there's a color or a motive that emerges. So yes, meditation, silence, reserving judgment, and sometimes
Quiet.
I would like to ask, because we are talking about India, you're originally from India, but India is a huge country, and as we could read in your poems, there is much of an Indian culture as maybe we know in it. Is it the way you remember? And what part of India are we talking, or are you writing about? It's also very mixed and very heterogeneous.
It's true. Thank you for observing that. The thing with my experience of India is I grew up in India. My father was an officer, and so we in the army, in the Indian army, so we moved around a lot, right? So and India is, I'm sorry, my earring is clicking against this. I'm going to take it off. So basically, we moved around and we moved frequently. And India has very many different states. And all of those states have different languages. In fact, I couldn't help smiling a little when in the reading beforehand, because when I came to Austria in the beginning, I used to find it so ridiculous. I literally found it ridiculous when people would say, oh, I'm German, or I'm from Bayern, or I'm from Tyrol, and all. I was like, these guys are like really crazy, because they all speak the same wretched language, which I was like beating my brains out on. And, because the Indian languages, each has a different script. So try to like figure out Bengali from whatever Hindi, So, and then I just found that it was so artificial, because the way of living was the same, right? Everybody has the same standard of life, and so it felt like, I'm wearing my yellow shirt today. So, in India, this diversity was my experience of India. So it was not difficult for me to move to Europe, in the sense like this is yet another reality you adjust to. And when you said heterogeneous, if I would want to simplify my point of view, I would say I write from the point of view of an Indian woman. That's my point of view. So it's not necessarily a woman of my class or from a certain location. That's my perception of myself. When I'm in India, I'm an Indian woman. And this is something I want to offer the audience. Look at me. And when I go to Morocco, I'm a Moroccan woman, right? Or if I go to Cuba, I'm a Cuban woman, right? So actually, I'm a universal woman. Or I think if I go to Turkey, or it's happened to me, in very many places where people just don't see you because you blend in, right? And unfortunately, for many white people, that's a problem. They don't blend in, right? Sometimes they're just very tall. My husband is German. He's extremely tall. He's like head and shoulders above, whatever, the Nepalis or something. So I am a universal woman when I'm in Europe. But in India, I'm an Indian woman. And that's a huge difference.
Thank you. Loulou, let's come to ask and talk a bit about you. You have like a wonderful symbiosis of voice and body and text. How hard is it to practice? how much work is it? And
well, it's an ongoing dilemma. What's now? What is the most important to do now? It's actually a good question. The answer is maybe not so interesting, but it's definitely a question that preoccupies me a lot. What is the priority? Because especially with the writing, for me, it's less a practice thing. I don't feel I have to warm up a lot in order to get to write a poem. But I have to, I think, and I feel that I have to work my body continuously, and I have to work my playing and my singing continuously in order not only to keep the level, but in order to have the access into the room of creativity, actually. So yes, the answer is yes.
You stated that your poems and artistic performances are means to investigate yourself, the self, but also the other. Well, could you tell us more about this? What did you mean?
To investigate, I just want to understand exactly the question.
To explore yourself, at least this is how I understood it. It's a means of
getting closer to how close I can get to whatever it is myself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I have the feeling that it's a feeling of with means of techniques and cultural, how you say, a tool, like a Werkzeug, yeah, of things I've learned and I train. I can get through them to meet in myself something that I maybe don't know from daily life, and that I have to trust that it will tell me something important, something truthful, and in that sense important. And then I could maybe also, since it's truthful, I could also love it. And it's very important to love it. And if I don't love it, it's gone. I don't love it because it's great, or because I'm great. I have no idea. I have to love it because it's like an opening that I try to make happen, to let something that, also it was a word that was mentioned before, transcend. That transcend my daily consciousness, my daily thinking, my daily even feeling of understanding of things. And there I feel that I have, at the same time, I say it's getting me closer to something or to something like myself, but it also have the feeling that it is possible, or it can be possible, because there is a certain kind of distanciation from what I think myself is normally. And then it's a feeling of certain liberation, and I think that for me, and I guess many artists or people who create in different artistic domains, I can imagine that the tools to get into these ways of expression allows a certain distanciation from certain kind of imprisoning that we have in ourselves on a daily level, and allows something that maybe transcends this one self, and maybe connects us to this another self. And this feeling of connecting to something, it's a joy. When this happens, it feels there is sense. Sense? It's English now? I don't know. There is sense, yeah? And this is the feeling of, that's maybe more the part of myself. But the other thing is that I believe, I don't know if to call it a belief. Let's say I believe. I think it is a truth, in other words, that this thing, this transcending moment, this going into on meeting something or discovering something, getting connected to something on this other level, this something does not belong only to me. And it's there not because of me. I just looked enough to have the chance to maybe touch it for a moment, but it belongs to everybody, and that's why it's a joy, because it's a feeling of some kind of connectivity. In that way, I think I experience artistic work as a chance to feel some connection on another level, which is I find it's a pain in our world not to feel that, which is very present, I think. I don't know if today more than before, whatever. But it's, let's say, an existential pain, and there are occasions to get away from it for a moment, from this pain, and to have a certain kind of joy and maybe even a relief. Yeah.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your answer the word connection. As someone who values immensely the importance of notebooks in our lives, I was very touched to discover in your text, Ich übersetze, this new meaning of the notebook, of the word notebook, which in Hebrew relates to connectedness, to connection. Thank you for sharing this with us. I'm curious, what does it mean, the notebook, for you and for your artistic practice?
I must say that before I wrote this text, and I write not knowing what comes next, each sentence more or less, I've never noticed that the word machberet in Hebrew comes from this root, which is the root of the verb and another lots of nouns and adjectives, which is really connecting, which I found it myself, wow. Yeah, I was exactly as astonished as anybody else might be. Yeah, but aside of that, well, when I write, my partner is this notebook. I don't write on computer points. Yeah? I write with a pen or whatever on a paper, which makes also that I have to go from one side to the other. Depends what language I write. And I have also always this, I call it in a neutral way, dilemma. Sometimes it's a fight. Because most of my notebooks, or maybe even all my notebooks, they start from both sides. And then I never know what, where was the beginning? Is it about to end? Or but when I write, definitely my partner is this notebook, and with it, in Hebrew it's a she, I talk. And also in this text, this feeling of finding a hole and falling inside is this, what I said before, for me, like this opening to this other place, to this other space. So it's, when I write, it's a notebook, but when I compose or when I do other things, also with the body, although with the body it's quite different, yeah, for me it's quite different, but mostly with music as well. There are kind of moments, like all of a sudden I feel relieved. I'm relieved, befreit, really. I'm liberated from these other things that I carry with me all the time, yeah? And I'm somewhere else, and it's this other place where everything can happen. You don't know. That's the notebook.
Let's talk about languages. Let's address a few questions to both of you about the use of languages. You, especially Loulou, you jump from one language to the other. What triggers the one or other language? Is it also Zufall oder?
I don't really know. Well, I think I actually, maybe what I can say is that I try not to, I don't know. I think I try not to intellectualize it in order to, or to even to understand it too well, so that I don't get too much of a program. I don't know, I think that, I think as a person who does not master so well the foreign languages I talk, it's not that I haven't done any academic studies in any language, I haven't learned it properly, whatever, I just accumulated some more, some less through the years in different ways, on different levels. And I think that my only chance in that sense to be free with them and to get to have them a part of me and me a part of them in a free way is just to let it come as it comes. And I think that the one thing I have to kind of to give for that I give myself this permission, and I in that way also demand from so many people to make the effort, yeah, to accept that, to get into that, to legitimate that. I thematize it. I say I'm not going to hide the problematic about it. I try to be sincere at the moment that it happens about that what happens. Also, there are also other things that come in that way. With the time, there were also some other parameters, like I started to concentrate more on writing in a way which is getting a little bit closer to what you call in German laut poésie. In French you call it poésie sonore. It's not that I do that, but I come a bit close, and sometimes there is a bit of some kind of Berührungspunkte. And it gets into my music, I would say musikalisch work as well. And in that way, I all of a sudden got a little bit more the wish to try it in French, because it's the language I master most after my mother tongue, yeah? So I thought I try, I see what happens, because in Hebrew it comes like this. Brr. I don't have to think about it, things come. It's not at all good or interesting, but things come. And in other languages, I have to think more and I have to check them. But there is this curiosity. There is really curiosity, and there are always like, kind of small fields or small teich, or how I say, small kind of organic, environments of the language and what it is for you and what you are there, and that's accessible somehow. Try to call them.
What about you, Mandakini? You already said that you have to learn this German.
It was only in the beginning. It was only in the beginning. Actually, I learned German quite quickly. It was a bit like people were very surprised. And I think probably it was because of the immersion, because I didn't hear any other language. And I was young, and I was very curious. And I like to communicate. So what was interesting was that I originally learned dialect. So tiefste Schwarzertalerisch, and I spoke like a 14-year-old, because my, I was constantly saying stuff like bis deppert or bis narisch, and so, because that's what I heard. Or, I said stuff like, I don't know what, really awful stuff. And just to make you guys laugh, I was a yoga teacher, so I got pushed into teaching yoga. I never wanted to teach it. I was like, I'm very young, how can I be a teacher? You know yoga, you can teach yoga. So I was like, okay. And so I didn't even know the words for the body parts, right? So I just heard words around me. So I was like teaching in this sort of slightly noble resort outside in the countryside in Höhlental. And there were all these fancy people from Vienna coming there for their cures and all. And then I was telling them, legen Sie auf die Wampen und heben Sie die Haxen and so on. They were like, wie lange sind Sie schon in Österreich? I was like, 3 Monate. And they were like, dafür sprechen Sie schon gut Deutsch. I was like, wow, I speak German, right? So it took so long for me to realize that the register of my language was like not right. I used to find people laughing, and I was like, okay, great, they understand me. So, finding my own voice in German, that was hard. And getting rid of the stupid dialect, which I love, actually. There are friends with whom I just speak only dialect, and I'm now married to a German. So recently I had a phone call with somebody in the countryside, and I said something in German, and there was like, that person said, wieso redest denn so geschwoin? Yeah, I was like, I had to say, I'm sorry, I'm married to a German, and now my language is geschwoin. Yeah, but so just to backtrack with languages, right? I grew up in an Indian household and in a middle-class household. My family is Punjabi. They are also refugees from Pakistan, Hindus. So they all have, we mix languages all the time. Now it's become less over the last, 30 years that I'm here. But originally it was all the time. We were switching languages within mid-sentence, so Punjabi, Hindi, English, Hindi, English, Punjabi. And we had codes. So if there were children around, we would speak English. Children learned Hindi first. And then we would even spell certain words, please give me my BRA, the bra is a very dangerous thing, so BRA, so the child doesn't know, that, or please remove the CHOCOLATE from the drawer, so that someone doesn't get it. So, we were using 3 different languages. Also with this, domestic help, we had different languages. So, that consciousness of register. Yesterday there were different people here, and they were talking about how German lacks, Barbie Markovic was talking about Schimpfwörter und Schimpftiraden, and really, I can't agree, because German is quite softig, actually, when you hear people cursing, and I've heard them cursing. And the other thing was like about love, language of love. And this is something I also want to offer to the audience. If you're in an intimate relationship with someone with another language, as Suleiman was saying today, it makes you try hard. It makes you push the language hard because you want to understand. And even if you don't speak, you listen harder, right? So, yeah. So yes, I mean, there's an array of languages, but I prefer to write in English. I feel that's my first language. There's nothing to say that I won't write in German, or recently I've also a little bit in Hindi. So, yeah.
Actually, one of my questions, but you touched on it, was partially what is your relationship with the languages you speak? And also from this perspective of this pressure from the society of immigrants to speak the new language perfectly. And how does this influence your writing?
To start? Perfecting the language, I wanted to perfect the language, and because I already came here with very good English, like all my school days and everything. Like the teachers used to say, "You please correct other students' papers." Indian teachers have a huge workload, like they have 60 students or something. So I was actually, so when I learned German, I wanted to perfect it. And I worked in technology. I have an MBA in technology, so you had to do a lot of stuff in written language. So there also I really struggled to make the German, kind of perfect. And I think I sometimes envy people who don't have to write stuff in German. Like now I write less in German, and then when I have to write it, I was like, oh God, you start a sentence and you have to know how it ends before you have to keep going back and changing stuff. And English is good that way. You can just kind of improvise and just run on. Oh. So that's why I prefer to write in English. But I must admit two things about German. Firstly, it is a language. I'm just throwing it in the audience. You all can agree or not agree. It teaches you to think precisely. It's a very precise language. So I kind of like it, And the other thing is, there was a time when I was, because of the body, there was a long time when I was in India and I was only speaking Hindi and English. And suddenly a bunch of German tourists turned up and I started speaking German to them. And somebody was observing me and he said, "What is this language that you're speaking?" So I said, "German." He says, "You really have to use a lot of energy for that." And it's true. To speak German well, maybe not dialect, but Austrian dialect, you have to bring in more tension into your body, I feel. Like you have to use your diaphragm more. Ich könnte natürlich auch so Deutsch reden und dann versteht mir natürlich keiner, wenn ich das nicht betone. Ja? Und wenn ich nicht eben, like we speak Hindi, हम ऐसे बोलते हैं, हमें उसमें कोई जोर नहीं लगाना पड़ता है. That is the thing. So in German, you have to, articulate certain sounds, and it's a taxing language. So, yeah. Costs you.
Has lots of consonants.
Yes, and they have to be articulated to be, because in Hindi we have, I don't know if there's someone here who speaks Hindi, but we have a lot of aspirated consonants, like we have k, h, g, h, j, t, th, d, dh, n, and other people can't even hear it, right? So there are these softer sounds, and you just shape the sound with your, throat and your body. So there's not that much explosive pressure in German, as in German, yeah.
And you, Loulou, would you like to share a few things about this, or?
German took lots of time and did not get to any perfection, but became an accessible language that I can even read and that I can even write as I can write. But it took me many years to even start wanting it, first of all. That happened actually with my first child, who came from the kindergarten, and I had to be there. And it was also a wish. It felt like, right, now this is my reality. And I started learning it actually by living it. I had maybe one course. I have never learned it properly. And I just let it in. I think I just let it in, and I take it as a part of my reality, and a part of my, also in that way, also mental reality, because it has a lot to do. It's my intimate life, which is, which is in this language almost. Not only I talk Hebrew with my children, and there are other languages also, but that's the most present language, which is its strength. The question about the pressure to talk it well, I guess for people who are verbal in their temperament, I think it's a certain pain not to master well a language where you live. I have to deal with that I cannot be as intelligent as I want, as precise, as to master the communication through the language with others as I would do in other languages, or my mother tongue basically, yeah? But even French. So I have that, which is also maybe interesting, because then it puts me in a more humble position, maybe as well. The pressure from outside, I think the real question is what pressure we do to ourselves. I do. But
Most of us are, that's why I'm
I
asking.
do.
Yeah.
But I try to have a kind of dialogue with this pressure. I do to myself. But actually in the writing, I don't have this feeling of pressure. I have the whole time to check everything I want to check. And when it's not there, it's not there. Everything is allowed. Then after, there is not a fear, or I try, or most of the time anyhow, there's not a fear so much from being wrong. So I can decide that I don't want to be wrong, so I check it, but I am not afraid. And I could have a certain fear in lots of situations in life that I just don't have it right, and I have the regard, I have the blick from the other, and it influences me, and I'm much more free from all that when I write.
Free of judgment as well.
Yes.
Because you mentioned it's the fear of not
Yes.
being wrong, but also not being judged.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. Are we going with one more question for both of you? We had one more question, no? Or we open the floor to the audience?
We have many
questions, but
but,
yeah. But we will not be
I
able
would,
to address all.
maybe
Yes.
I'll ask later, Loulou, we'll see if we have time. I'll ask her maybe to chante un petit chanson encore pour finir. Ein petit Piano, aber das ist nur wenn du das möchtest. This will be beautiful. So then,
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I. I have. Yes.
let's see if there are questions first.
Loulou, I would like to ask you, is there a link between the many languages that you use and the fact that you use also the body? Is there a language? Is there a link between that?
Between them.
Between the fact that you use many languages in your work, and you also employ your body very much. So,
Yeah.
is there a link between that, or is this just coincidence?
Well, I could answer on two levels maybe. One level is that maybe there is kind of a Grundnervosität that needs to go out also with the body. Could be. It could be also not a joke. But the other thing is that what I feel maybe, I don't know if it's exactly the answer to your question, but maybe what it makes some kind of echo in me is that I do see a parallel for me, or a certain connection between the it's not so many, but it's few, the few languages that I kind of jongle with, and the different media that I use artistically, which this, in one hand, this demand from myself and from the thing and from the people who watch, there is a certain demand, and there is a certain, which is maybe also a kind of, I don't want to let anything loose, I want to have it all in one hand, and in the other hand, there is also maybe everything can go, everything can come and can go, and I cannot decide and don't have to decide. There is no hierarchy, and there is no the best or the better. So there is dialectic, whatever, I don't know. There is maybe these two poles, and I'm a person of poles, maybe, and that's the way I feel the most maybe authentic for me to go with the multitude, with the different things. I don't know if that's close to what you were asking.
To me, watching you performing, dancing, moving, I thought there is something in the body that tells about speaking many languages and living many languages that only the body can tell, Mm-hmm. This is what I wanted to say. And I think, mm-hmm. I mean, for me, who works mostly with text, it was such an insight and such a pleasure to see, look what the body can do to express this multiplicity and the fact that we embody many languages.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very happy, and I thank you for having experiences like that and telling me that. I often ask myself also exactly that. Do I have to do it at the same time? Isn't it already said? Is it redundant? Yeah, is it saying it again or trying to? And then I think, but I have to. I think it would be wrong not to do it. That's the closest I could get to an answer. Well, historically in my life, I've done much longer dance that I'm writing. To that, I have to say, my father was a poet. And many, many years, there was absolutely no question for me writing poems. I have never done it as a child. I've never done it as a teenager. I started doing it, I don't know, something like 15 years ago. But then, with most free and like a luxury time. No pressure, no thinking, would my father like it or not? Am I good enough? I just do it anyhow. It's other languages, maybe that was the secret. So that was the key for my free feeling in it. It came like from a totally other direction for me, the writing, than what I have trained since I'm a child as a dancer, and became a much kind of loaded tool, which is the body. It's loaded also because of the many years I worked with it, and it had all these doubts as well of, is it authentic or is it too learned? Is it too much of a habit? Is it too much simply technique? Because what I can do with my body, other people can do many other things with their bodies, but I cannot do that. So maybe it's just so maybe many other questions that come in and that kind of define the room of my movement. which are not at all did not exist in the way I came into the words world. And when they come together, it's still for me it's a huge question. And I don't really have yet the answer. It's like the way I'm on. I try to again and again understand what kind of movement, why this movement, this quality, this tempo, this whatever, if it's like this or if it's like this, and with what text, if at all. And I don't have, let's say, the method or the system to it.
Thank you. Mandakini, I also have a very short question for you, or yeah, it's a question in fact. You translated your own poems from English into German.
That's right.
I don't know if you did this for the first time, this kind of translation, self-translating yourself?
Not the first time, but not so many poems at once. And frankly, I mean, I would, if I ever translated a poem, I just selected a poem and I thought this would work in German or something. I've written a lot, so, you know, and at that point, I hadn't thought of this when I gave you this work. So then I said, oh, let me translate it myself. So I must admit I had to put more thought to it than I would have just simply selected a poem and said, let me translate that. And it was an interesting experience for me because, you know, I've kind of declared English my language, but this went so well. And I was like so surprised. I was like, okay, you know, this is easy actually. So, I've often had the experience when I write that, you know, somehow there's a slight kind of blip in my writing and I have to wait for the words. And I know that it's some kind of automatic translation going on in my mind, right? So I remain without, you know, like you said, without judgment, and then it comes. And I realized that, you know, several languages are probably, you know, circulating through me when I'm sort of writing. And even in conversation, if I know that the other person speaks German or the other person speaks Hindi, then I do use the other language, whatever I like at that time. So it was an interesting experience, and you know, it's kind of tempted me now to maybe write directly in German. I don't know where that's going to take me. Yeah. So yes, and thank you for that experience, for triggering it. Not really, actually. I kind of, you know, what happened to me was that I used German in my profession as a manager. So I kind of, it's also my life in the sense that for a long time, I felt like Europe is where I work, right? So, and German is a language that I use to work. And English is like where I kind of just relax or whatever I do, and it's the more universal thing. So these things got kind of intermingled. And once I left technology, it took me a while to come back to my own writing and to writing in English. And so, you know, maybe I would write in German. And frankly, quite honestly, you know, this festival invited me. I never felt there's any place for my work in German. You know, there's this like huge edifice. If you look here, there's Goethe and Schiller and all of these big guys, and they're like so fantastically present, you know. So you feel like, oh my God, like, you know, woo, you know. So, so that's why I just never thought of writing in German. Also, in the belief that there is no audience for it, or yeah.
May I say one small thing? I just would like to thank, aside of all that and all which is here, which is very beautiful and was totally unexpected for me, and all that, what that brought and made possible, it's for me important to mention my translator for the 3 poems which were translated, whose name is Gundula Shifa. And it was beautiful working with her, very close work and very sensitive, and I just want to have her name present.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both, and thank you to our audience for being with us. We would also like to thank to our partners Shift Brunnen Passage, Volkskundemuseum and Radio Orange, as well as to all the authors, artists and cultural workers, as well as to the wonderful festival team who made the Bridging the Tongues Festival possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much.